In the United States, early Tuesday morning, Republican candidate Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Kamala Harris won the same number of votes in northeastern town of Dixville Notch. Dixville Notch is the first town to exercise its right to vote. A committee of 6 gave 3 votes to Trump and 3 to Harris. In 2020, incumbent U.S. President Joe Biden won a 5-vote-to-0 victory over former President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, polling stations in the rest of the country are opening their doors early in the morning. The latest polls show that both candidates have an equal chance of reaching the White House. Let's take a look at the opening hours of polling stations in the U.S. for this presidential election, which vary by state and municipality, but as a general rule, they open between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. local time. More than 240 million people are eligible to vote in this presidential election, held every 4 years on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, which will also include elections for the House of Representatives and 1/3 of the Senate. Among the first citizens to cast their ballots were residents of Vermont, who could do so as early as 5 a.m. in some parts of the state. This year, only 7 swing states with very narrow margins of victory are the focus of the campaigns: Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. We are now joined from the South here with Juan Carlos Valareso, the chair of the International Department at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Ecuador. Welcome, Juan Carlos, to From the South.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you. Juan Carlos, first question. Yesterday was the last day of campaigning for both of the main candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. As polls are opening across the nation, what impact can those last day of rally have in the outcome of this election?
Well, I think it's very important to notice that both candidates are appealing to their target vote. In the case of Kamala Harris, I think she has more of a chance to appeal the Latino vote in the sense that she's proposed policies that are not as hard or restrictive as Donald Trump's. At the same time, Donald Trump seems to be addressing the issue of migration as one of the most important elements of his platform, by taking an approach that's very condemning of the situation.
Can we expect, because we have been seeing coming into the days, people have been preparing and people have had a higher turnout in early voting in these elections, are people concerned that there could be violence during this electoral process?
Well, I think this is considered to be one of the most important elections in the United States and for the United States in the world, since we are faced with 2 very opposing views of presidency. On the one hand, we have a very radical and predictable Donald Trump that, in a way, scares a lot of the markets, a lot of the governments, even though he has support of Latin American governments such as Milei or the Bolsonaro supporters. However, I think Kamala Harris in that sense brings more of a certainty, or at least more establishment following, and in that aspect I think it's more reassuring in a way that the last days of campaign have shown how volatile the speech has become, especially with Donald Trump.
Taking into consideration the global context of the different crises, especially of violence, of war, of migration, like in the Middle East, what impact can foreign policy of the U.S. have depending on the outcome of these elections?
It's a very interesting question because I think it depends on the topic we're talking about. When it comes to trade, I think the markets, and especially big corporations, put their hope more in Trump, since he has more of a bilateral and transactional relation with their partners. At the same time, when talking about war or security, even though both candidates have expressed that they will have a hard take on situations that involve the United States interests, I think in that aspect, Kamala Harris has more of a multilateral approach. We should expect continuation in terms of approaching multilateral forum and trying to negotiate with their strategic partners, the European Union. It's also interesting when we talk about China, for instance, to see that both candidates have an approach where they want to stop China's increase in terms of the world's economy. And that's something that we should see regardless of who wins. Now, when it comes to the approach on wars, we've heard Donald Trump with a very drastic speech as to how to stop wars, but he hasn't really said how he would do it. And that is related to the unpredictability that I was referring to before. Whereas in the case of Harris, she is in a dilemma, especially regarding the war on Gaza, the Israeli intervention on Palestine, because at the beginning she started by aligning with Israel and defending the position of the United States on Israel. But as we see with the Muslim vote also being into consideration, a key aspect for the election, Harris has shifted a little bit into the element of also stopping the war in order to protect human rights in Gaza.
Migration and border control is also another topic where both candidates have different views. How can this impact on the vote during the day?
I think migration, you've talked about the most spoken issue for the audience in the United States. The American society is very concerned about the topic of migration, and the way they've approached it also differs depending on the candidate. Like, for instance, in the case of Trump, he continues with his 2016 speech and approach on having a harsh policy regarding migration, whereas Harris, even though aligns with Trump in terms of strengthening the border patrols and the controls at the border, has had more of a cooperative approach when it comes to also talking with the Latin American countries, especially with Mexico, since it's the biggest migration that we've seen in the last decades, in order to also cooperate in terms of how these migrants cross the border. I think it's very important also to emphasize the fact that the Latin vote in the United States, even though has historically been in favor of the Democrat Party, it has now had a tendency, depending on the state, like Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, to increase favoring the Republican Party. And that's something that says a lot as well, because, you know, when we talk about the Latin community in the United States, whether it is first, second, third generation of Latin people, we're going to see there a shift in terms of their tendency of who to vote for, right? I consider that regardless of who wins, we're going to see more of a policy that, in order to satisfy the American society, will have a strong take on the issue of migration.
One last question, Juan Carlos. In your opinion, could we possibly expect a shift in direction in terms of strategies of the U.S. foreign policy towards, for example, Cuba and Venezuela and other nations in terms of the international sanctions and the coercive measures that are imposed against these nations and others in the region and in other parts of the world?
I think, yes, they do differ depending on whether it is Trump or Harris. Let's remember that during the Democratic presidency of Obama, the relations with Cuba started taking a shift towards the traditional isolationist and imposing sanctions approach of the United States regarding Cuba. However, when Trump was in the presidency, he totally erased those efforts and went back to a very strict and imposing sanctions approach, both to Cuba and Venezuela. It's interesting to see how after the elections, the very controversial elections that took place in Venezuela, Harris stated that there should be a showing of the polling records from the Venezuelan government in order to be recognized, thing which we know has not happened. However, in the case of Donald Trump, he hasn't really stated much about these countries. However, it is expected that he will take a hardline approach regarding the countries considered to be leftist, right, in this aspect, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela. We've heard comments of Donald Trump calling all of the leaders from these countries dictators. And that's something that tells us a lot about what the approach would be should Donald Trump win the election.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, for your times and inputs here from the South. Let's stay on topic on the elections in the United States. Let's go live now with our special envoy, Carlos Montero, for details as the election day kickstarts.
Hi, good morning from Washington. Election day, a lot of expectation here, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Most of the states open the polls, and all the newspapers, of course, here they are analyzing what's going to happen the day that the people of the USA has the final word. The one who has the final words in the campaign also were the candidates. Last night, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris offered a different situation of the country. What would be a presidency of Kamala? How would be a president of Donald Trump? Let's start talking about the former president. Donald Trump did the last act in Michigan. He was really, he showed his age. He was really somber. He was really worried. He was saying, we have to make America great. We are trying to protect our democracy because the country is not going in the right direction. He promised that the situation with immigration, he said, this country has been taken over by immigrants. We have to stop that. This country belongs to Americans, not to immigrants who are taking our jobs. People were crazy when he was saying that. People, I guess immigration for the Republican is something really important. He said democracy is in danger. The system is broken. We have to change that, and he exhorts all his followers to go today to the poll centers and vote. They need to vote. Before going to Kamala Harris, I tell you so far, the last information we have, the voting in advance is something a record. 82 million Americans already vote. Another million more would do it during today. Now let's go to the Vice President, Kamala Harris. She closed the event in Pennsylvania. State that she spent the whole day going to different places, different meetings. It was in a Spanish restaurant, talking to the Puerto Rican community. It's very important in Pennsylvania, the Puerto Rican community. But the closing act was really late last night. She was really upbeat. She didn't mention Donald Trump. She said, we have to turn the page. We cannot hate each other. We are all American. If I'm a president, I'm going to be the president of all the Americans. We have to protect the right of our women. We have to protect the different condition of sexuality of our people. We have to protect, get back to have the woman, if she wants to decide to get an abortion, she has the right to do it. I'm going to work for that. And please, tomorrow we are going to have a new America when Kamala Harris is going to be the president of the USA. We don't know that. All the polls are very close. I tell you new information. There is something very symbolic. It's not going to change the result, but everybody at midnight, they are waiting the result of a small location in the north of the USA, in the border con Canada. It's small town, and it was a tie. It was 3 votes for Kamala, 3 votes for Donald Trump. But let's see what's happened today. Hopefully it's not going to be any kind of incident. You can see all the stores in the capital. They are with those covered, all the glass windows. They are scared there were some violence. But we are going to have a very important coverage, teleSUR in English, teleSUR in Spanish, and at night we are going to have a special program, but we are going to keep informed in English too, English and Spanish. But that's all from here right now. We'll be back in any minute. Going back to the studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos, for the information. Welcome back. Let's continue on topic on the important U.S. elections being held today. Let's go live with a special envoy in Washington, Carlos Montero, for more details of everything that is happening.
Good morning from Washington. Already it's been a little bit more than 2 hours that the polls open in the East Coast. No incidents so far, so good. We are here living an historic election. Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, they are expecting that today a lot of people go to vote to change this tie we have in all the polls. They said Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they are head to head, so they are expecting today the people went to vote and change the situation we are living right now, this tie. Last night, they closed the campaign, a long campaign that has at this country, you know, going crazy. Listen what Trump is saying, what Kamala is trying to say. But let me tell you what happened last night. Last night, Donald Trump closed his campaign. He was really, he looks like not the real Trump. He was really looks somber. He looks sad. He wasn't with so much energy as he usually have. He said this country is in a bad shape. We need to make America great again. This country has been invaded by immigrants. We have to change that situation. America is for the American, and we cannot let so many people from other countries to be here and take your job. People in the audience went crazy when he said that, and he believes that he is going to win. The problem is what's happening if he doesn't win, how he's going to react. He's going to do like he did 4 years ago. We don't know. We have to be careful, because what he's saying, he knows he's going to win, but if he doesn't win, that's the big question, how he's going to react. Let's talk now about Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, she closed her campaign in Pennsylvania. It was like a show, big show. There were a lot of celebrities listen to her, Paul Bon Jovi, Lady Gaga, Oprah Winfrey, among other famous people. And she said, you know, I'm tired of this country to be so divided. She did not mention Donald Trump by name. She said, I'm a new generation of politicians. We want that USA be back of what we are. We valorate our values. We are a country that we don't hate so much. We have to be together. And if I win, I'm going to be the president of the blue and the red, Republican and Democrat. I'm not going to be only the president of one group. And she was pretty optimistic. She believes she can win today, but like I said before, the polls are very close. We don't know, depends how many people are going to the polls today. So far I see lines in different cities when we are watching the people from the feeds, from the people voting. I can see big lines. What I can tell you, a lot of people vote in advance in this election. So far, the last numbers we are having is 82 million of Americans vote ahead of today. So that, I mean, that's a number really, really big. Let's see what's happened during the rest of the day. We are going to have a very important coverage here in teleSUR English, teleSUR Spanish. I hope you can follow us. If you ask me, are we going to know the results today? Probably, but it's going to be very difficult. Please follow us. We are going to have a special coverage, and we are going to let you know what's going on. Going back to you at the studio.
Thank you, Carlos, for all the latest information. We'll stay tuned with you in upcoming news.